The girl in the back row. The bell hadn't yet rung, but Maya Rodriguez was already in her seat, the last one in the back row. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air and catching the worn edges of her geography textbook. She traced the outline of the Himalayas on the cover with a fingertip, the peaks worn smooth by years of anxious exploration. The sounds of the hallway, boisterous shouts and the squeak of sneakers on linoleum, faded into a dull hum. This was her space, her corner of the world, a place where she could observe without being observed. Ms. Evans bustled into the classroom, a whirlwind of brightly colored scarves and encouraging smiles. "Good morning, everyone," she chirped, her voice warm and welcoming. Her gaze swept across the room, lingering for a moment on Maya. A flicker of concern, quickly masked by a genuine smile, crossed her face. "Welcome back to another exciting day of 4th grade." Ethan Becker, already bouncing in his seat, raised his hand so high his shoulder nearly dislocated. "Ms. Evans. Did you see my science project? It's about volcanoes." Ms. Evans chuckled. "I did, Ethan, and it's very impressive. We'll be discussing it later." She turned her attention back to the class, her eyes settling on Maya once more. "Maya, I'm so glad you're here. Did you have a good weekend?" Maya's head remained bowed, her fingers now smoothing the dog-eared corner of a page about the Amazon rainforest. She offered a slight nod, almost imperceptible. The bell finally shrieked, cutting through the classroom din. As Ms. Evans launched into a math lesson, Maya quietly opened her notebook, her attention seemingly fixed on the equations on the board. But her eyes kept drifting to the window, to the vast expanse of blue, imagining the flight paths of unseen aircraft, calculating wind speeds and altitudes in her head. Recess was a cacophony of shrieks and laughter, a swirling vortex of jump ropes and tag. Maya remained inside, a solitary figure amidst the abandoned desks. Sofia Ramirez, her brow furrowed with concern, approached Maya's desk. "Hey, Maya," Sofia said softly, fiddling with the friendship bracelet on her wrist. "Want to come outside? We're playing Foursquare." Maya shook her head, her gaze fixed on a worn map of the world taped to the wall. Ethan, overhearing the exchange, sauntered over, a smug grin on his face. "She never talks, Sofia. Don't waste your time. She's probably drawing airplanes again." He mimicked the sound of a jet engine, earning a few giggles from nearby classmates. Sofia frowned at Ethan. "Leave her alone, Ethan." But Ethan, emboldened by his audience, persisted. "Maybe she's a spy. Maybe she's collecting intel on our playground strategies." A blush crept up Maya's neck, prickling her skin. She lowered her eyes, wishing she could simply disappear. The world map, usually a source of comfort, now felt like a spotlight, highlighting her difference, her silence. Sofia, sensing Maya's discomfort, glared at Ethan. "Just stop it, Ethan. It's not funny." She turned back to Maya, her voice gentle. "Don't listen to him, Maya. He's just being." "Ethan." Maya offered a small, grateful smile, her eyes meeting Sophia's for a fleeting moment. Then, she turned back to the map, retreating once more into her silent world, the whispers and laughter of the playground fading into a distant hum. The sky, vast and endless, called to her, a place where words weren't needed, where only coordinates and angles mattered. Whispers and wondering. Ms. Evans cleared her throat, the sound amplified in the quiet classroom. "Maya, what did you think of the poem's imagery? Did any particular lines resonate with you?" Maya, sitting in the back row near the window, met Ms. Evans' gaze briefly before her eyes darted down to the worn surface of her desk. A faint smile played on her lips, almost imperceptible, but Ms. Evans saw it. "It's okay if you don't want to share, of course," Ms. Evans added gently, "but I'm always curious to hear your thoughts." Maya just shrugged, the smile widening slightly but still silent. Ethan Becker, perched precariously on the back legs of his chair near the front, snorted. "Maybe she is a spy," he announced, his voice booming through the room. Gathering intel on our poetry analysis skills. Top secret stuff, you know. A few kids giggled, but Sofia Ramirez, who sat beside Ethan, shot him a withering look. That's not funny, Ethan. Leave her alone. Her dark eyes, usually sparkling with laughter, were clouded with concern as she glanced back at Maya. Sofia had noticed the way Maya flinched at loud noises, the way she always seemed to be observing, but never participating. The bell rang, a jarring sound that made Maya jump. She was the first one out of her seat, her backpack already slung over her shoulder, and she slipped out the door before Ms. Evans could say another word. The classroom emptied quickly, leaving Ms. Evans alone with the lingering scent of old textbooks and adolescent anxiety. She walked over to her desk and pulled out Maya's file. Standard information, address, emergency contact, previous school records. Nothing that screamed silent. The notes from her previous teachers were vague: quiet student, keeps to herself, academically sound, but struggles with participation. One teacher had even written, possible selective mutism. Ms. Evans frowned. She hated labels. She reread the referral from the school psychologist. Anxiety suspected. Recommend observation and supportive interventions. Observation. It felt like watching a bird trapped in a cage, its wings clipped. Ms. Evans closed the file with a sigh. She wanted to unlock whatever was keeping Maya silent, to help her find her voice. But how? The girl was a fortress, built brick by silent brick. The helicopter incident from the previous week kept replaying in her mind. It was so strange, so precise. The coordinates, the lack of emotion, the sudden, instinctual response. Was there something more to Maya than met the eye? A secret world hidden beneath the surface of her silence. A roar from above. Ms. Evans adjusted her glasses, the fluorescent lights of the classroom reflecting in the lenses. All right class, let's turn to page 72. We're going to be tackling equivalent fractions today. A collective groan rippled through the room, quickly stifled as she shot them a gentle, but firm, look. Maya Rodriguez, seated in the back corner, barely registered the shift. Her gaze was fixed on a knot in the wooden desk, tracing its swirling pattern with an invisible finger. Fractions, like most of school, felt distant and irrelevant. So, who can tell me what the numerator represents in a fraction? Ms. Evans scanned the room, her eyes lingering for a moment on Maya before moving on. She'd been reviewing Maya's file during lunch, a knot of concern tightening in her stomach. Withdrawn. Unresponsive. Above average intelligence, but failing to engage. How to reach her? Suddenly, a low thrum vibrated through the floor, growing rapidly into a deafening roar. It wasn't the familiar rumble of a passing truck, but something closer, heavier. The windows rattled in their frames. What's that? Ethan Becker, the class clown, called out, abandoning any pretense of listening to Ms. Evans. The roar intensified. Everyone craned their necks, peering out the windows. A helicopter, a dark, menacing shape against the pale sky, was circling the school. The blades whirred with a ferocity that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. Ethan, predictably, seized the opportunity. Maybe they're here to pick up Maya. You know, for being so quiet. He snickered, earning a few nervous giggles from other students. Sofia Ramirez, seated near Maya, shot Ethan a disgusted look. That's not funny, Ethan. Leave her alone. She turned to Maya, her brow furrowed with concern. Are you okay, Maya? Maya hadn't moved. Her eyes were wide, almost unnaturally so, but fixed on the helicopter. Her knuckles were white as she gripped the edge of her desk. The whirring blade seemed to amplify the hum in her ears, a sound that both terrified and familiar. The helicopter dipped lower, its shadow engulfing the classroom. The air crackled with an unnatural energy. Ms. Evans, her face pale, struggled to maintain order. Everyone, stay calm. It's probably just a routine flyover. But her voice lacked conviction. Another circle. The helicopter seemed to be scrutinizing the school, its presence an invasive, unsettling force. The air grew thick with anticipation, a sense of impending something. Then, Maya spoke. Her voice, barely a whisper, yet clear and precise, cut through the noise. Latitude 34, 0522 degrees north, longitude 118, 2437 degrees west. The class went silent. Even the helicopter seemed to pause for a fraction of a second. All eyes turned to Maya, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. She hadn't spoken a full sentence in class since anyone could remember. Coordinates in the air. The thumping of the helicopter blades intensified, vibrating through the old windows of the classroom. Ms. Evans paused mid-sentence, her hand fluttering to her throat. Even Ethan Becker, notorious for his paper airplane assaults, had stopped, momentarily mesmerized by the aerial intrusion. Then it happened. Maya Rodriguez, who usually occupied the back corner like a shadow clinging to the wall, straightened. It wasn't a gradual shift. It was a jolt, as if an electric current had surged through her. Her eyes, usually downcast and hidden behind a curtain of dark hair, snapped open, focusing on something beyond the classroom walls. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Maya never spoke. Not ever. Her voice, when it came, was clear, strong, and devoid of any of the hesitancy one might expect from someone who hadn't uttered a word in years. Latitude 34, 0522, longitude -118. 2437, just heading 2 degrees east. The words sliced through the drone of the helicopter like a hot knife through butter. Everyone stared, mouths agape. Ms. Evans's carefully constructed lesson plan lay forgotten on her desk. Ethan snickered nervously. Maybe she's finally cracked, he muttered, earning a sharp elbow to the ribs from Sofia Ramirez. Shut up, Ethan, Sofia hissed, her eyes fixed on Maya with concern. Are you okay, Maya? Maya didn't acknowledge Sofia. Her gaze remained fixed on the sky, tracking the helicopter's movement. Altitude decreasing. Maintain current speed. Prepare for, dust off. She tilted her head slightly, as if listening to an unheard voice. A beat of silence hung heavy in the air. Then, almost imperceptibly, the helicopter seemed to shift its trajectory. Just a fraction, a barely noticeable correction, but it was there. The change was so slight that anyone not paying extremely close attention would have missed it. What the? Ethan's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of genuine bewilderment. Ms. Evans, recovering her composure, took a tentative step towards Maya. Maya, dear, are you feeling all right? Perhaps you should sit down. But Maya remained rooted to the spot, her eyes locked on the helicopter. She spoke again, her voice a steady stream of directions. Bearing 170. Increase rate of descent. Obstacle, 2 o'clock. Tower. Clear it by. She paused, her brow furrowing, 30 feet. The helicopter dipped lower, and for a heart-stopping moment, it seemed to be heading directly for the old water tower that loomed precariously near the school grounds. Then, with a barely perceptible adjustment, it cleared the tower by what looked like an impossibly small margin. Unveiling the secret. The helicopter banked sharply, following the course Maya had dictated. Ms. Evans, her knuckles white on the controls, swallowed hard. Maya, she said, her voice trembling slightly, where did you learn those coordinates? The girl, still staring out the window, didn't immediately respond. The rhythmic thrum of the engine filled the sudden silence. Then, softly, almost a whisper, she said, from the maps. Ms. Evans frowned. Maps? What maps? Maya turned, her brown eyes, usually so withdrawn, now held a spark of something akin to excitement. All kinds of maps. Topographical, nautical, even celestial. I like them. They tell stories. Stories? Ms. Evans repeated, bewildered. This was a Maya she had never seen before, a Maya who spoke with a quiet confidence that belied her 13 years. Yes. Stories of where things are, where they were, and where they might be. Of journeys taken and journeys yet to come. Maya's gaze drifted back to the landscape rushing below. Coordinates are just the language they use to speak. Ms. Evans eased back on the throttle, 100 questions swirling in her mind. But, how did you learn to read that language so fluently? It's not exactly part of the 7th grade curriculum. A shadow crossed Maya's face, momentarily dimming the light in her eyes. My grandfather, she said, her voice softer now. He was a pilot. Flew cargo planes all over the world. He used to bring me back maps from every place he went. Huge, colorful things, spread out on the living room floor. She smiled, a fleeting, wistful smile that tugged at Ms. Evans' heart. He taught me how to read them. How to plot courses, calculate distances, understand the terrain. He said knowing how to navigate was like having a superpower. You could never truly be lost. The memory seemed to embolden her. Maya pointed towards a cluster of trees in the distance. We need to adjust our heading slightly, Ms. Evans. About 5 degrees to the east. There's a ravine ahead that isn't marked on the older charts. Ms. Evans, still reeling from the revelation, hesitated only for a moment. She trusted Maya's instincts, even if she didn't understand them. She adjusted the controls, feeling the helicopter respond smoothly to her touch. The air smelled faintly of pine and aviation fuel, a strange but comforting combination. He doesn't fly anymore, Maya continued, her voice barely audible above the engine noise. He had an accident. Grounded him. But he still has the maps. Her fingers traced invisible lines on the window. All of them. Ms. Evans glanced at Maya, seeing a flicker of sadness beneath the newfound confidence. This wasn't just about maps and coordinates, it was about a connection, a shared passion, a love for the open sky that had been tragically cut short for her grandfather. And somehow, Maya had inherited that passion, that knowledge, and perhaps, a desperate need to keep it alive. Maps in the classroom. Ms. Evans tapped her pen against the whiteboard, the rhythmic click echoing in the otherwise silent classroom. Yesterday's helicopter incident had thrown everything off kilter, not least of all her lesson plans. But something about Maya's sudden, precise instructions had sparked an idea. Maps. The curriculum called for it anyway. But instead of dry lectures about longitude and latitude, she could, what? Make it a game. A challenge? She smiled. All right, class, she announced, today, we become explorers. A few groans rippled through the room. Don't worry, no actual hiking involved. We're going on a virtual treasure hunt using maps and coordinates. Ethan Becker, usually the class clown, was still subdued, his eyes darting nervously towards Maya. Sophia Ramirez, ever watchful, sat beside Maya, her hand hovering protectively near Maya's arm. Ms. Evans unfurled a large, laminated map of the local area, pinpointing landmarks with brightly colored stickers. Each sticker represents a treasure. I'll give you a set of coordinates, and you have to tell me what landmark is located there. First one to answer correctly gets a point. The initial coordinates were simple, a park, the local library. Hands shot up, the class buzzing with newfound enthusiasm. Even Ethan seemed to be getting into it, albeit with a hesitant glance at Maya every so often. Then, Ms. Evans upped the ante. Okay, next one, 34. 0522 degree N, 118. 2437 degrees west, silence. This wasn't on the map. It was outside the city limits, somewhere in the hills. Before anyone could even attempt an answer, a clear voice cut through the quiet. Griffith Observatory. Every head swiveled towards Maya. Her eyes were fixed on the map, her brow furrowed in concentration. Sophia squeezed Maya's hand, a mixture of pride and concern on her face. Ms. Evans, caught off guard, stammered, "That's correct, Maya." "How did you know?" Maya simply shrugged, her gaze returning to the map as if drawn by an invisible force. "Just knew." Ethan's initial awe quickly morphed into something akin to fear. He shrunk back in his seat, muttering something about needing to use the restroom. Ms. Evans ignored him, focusing on Maya. "Okay, next one. And Maya, maybe give the others a chance this time." She felt a pang of guilt even as she said it. This was Maya's moment to shine. But the next set of coordinates, even more obscure than the last, were met with blank stares. Again, Maya spoke, her voice a low murmur, almost to herself, 34. 1381 degrees north, 118. 1587 degrees W, abandoned radio tower, near Mount Lee. Ms. Evans, genuinely bewildered now, consulted her own notes. Maya was right. It was an abandoned radio tower, not even officially marked on most maps. "Maya," Ms. Evans began, her voice laced with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, "how are you doing this?" The question hung in the air, unanswered, as Maya continued to stare at the map, seemingly lost in its intricate details. The air in the classroom crackled with unspoken questions, with the unsettling feeling that they were witnessing something extraordinary, something beyond explanation. A new perspective. The hum of the departing helicopter faded, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. Maya, still clutching the edge of her desk, blinked slowly, as if waking from a dream. Ethan sat beside her, pale and rigid. Sophia, ever vigilant, squeezed Maya's hand. "Maya, are you okay?" Sophia's voice was a low murmur, barely audible above the residual buzz in the room. Maya nodded, her dark eyes wide and unfocused. The chalk dust motes dancing in the sunlight seemed to fascinate her. Ethan remained silent, his gaze fixed on Maya with an intensity that bordered on fear. Mr. Davies, still slightly flustered, cleared his throat. "Well, class, that was, certainly unexpected. Maya, your map-reading skills are impressive." Impressive was an understatement. The coordinates she'd rattled off were precise, pulled from thin air, a feat that usually took hours of painstaking calculation. A murmur rippled through the room. The whispers weren't cruel this time, not taunting. They were laced with awe, with curiosity. During lunch, Maya usually retreated to the library, seeking solace amongst the dusty shelves. Today, however, the library felt too enclosed. She wandered towards the edge of the playground, the asphalt hot beneath her worn sneakers. Sophia followed, her steps mirroring Maya's. "You were amazing back there, Maya," Sophia said, her voice laced with genuine admiration. "Those coordinates. How did you know?" Maya shrugged, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I just knew." The words were still strange on her tongue, foreign and clumsy. Sophia didn't press. Instead, she pulled a tattered atlas from her backpack. "I love maps," she confessed, flipping it open to a page filled with intricate lines and vibrant colors. "Want to look at them with me during recess tomorrow? We could find the highest mountain, or the longest river." Maya's lips curved into a small, hesitant smile. It was the first time anyone had genuinely invited her to share something they loved. The afternoon dragged. Ethan remained withdrawn, avoiding Maya's gaze. After the final bell, as students jostled towards the exit, he approached her, his eyes darting nervously around the room. "Maya," he mumbled, shuffling his feet. I have a geography project due next week. On cartography. And I'm really stuck. Could you, maybe, help me?" His request was hesitant, almost painful. But Maya saw the desperation in his eyes, a plea for understanding, perhaps even forgiveness. He'd always been one of the ringleaders of the silent torment she endured daily. Okay, Maya said, her voice barely a whisper. But it was enough. Ethan visibly relaxed, the tension draining from his shoulders. He scribbled his number on a scrap of paper, his hand trembling slightly. Call me, anytime. As Maya walked home, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, she felt a shift within her. The silence that had defined her for so long was beginning to crumble, replaced by a fragile sense of belonging. The fear was still there, lurking beneath the surface, but it was now accompanied by something else, a flicker of hope. The world hadn't changed, not entirely. But her place in it, perhaps, had. Finding her voice. My favorite kind of map, Maya said, her voice still a little shaky but clearer than it had been, is a thematic map. One that shows information. Like population density, or rainfall. Not just where things are, but what's happening there. Ms. Evans blinked, her pen hovering above the attendance sheet. Had Maya volunteered that? It seemed impossible, even after the helicopter incident. Ethan Becker remained slumped in his seat, his gaze fixed on his scuffed sneakers. Sophia Ramirez, on the other hand, beamed at Maya, a silent encouragement radiating from her. That's fascinating, Maya, Ms. Evans managed, forcing a smile. Could you give us an example? Maya hesitated, then plunged forward. Like, a map of bird migration routes. Or one showing the spread of a disease. They tell a story. A few students were actually listening, their heads tilted in curiosity. Even Ethan seemed to have subtly straightened up. Later that week, during silent reading, Ms. Evans noticed Maya engrossed in a thick paperback. Enjoying your book, Maya? She asked casually, walking past her desk. Maya startled, almost dropping the book. It was The Martian, by Andy Weir, its cover worn from repeated readings. Yes, Ms. Evans, she mumbled, clutching the book tighter. What's it about? Maya's eyes lit up, a spark of genuine enthusiasm flickering within them. It's about an astronaut who gets stranded on Mars and has to use science and engineering to survive. He has to problem solve, you know. Figure out how to grow food, make water, communicate with Earth. She paused, catching herself. It's really good. Sounds challenging, Ms. Evans said, genuinely intrigued. What's the biggest challenge he faces? Maya didn't hesitate. Loneliness. And the constant threat of failure. One mistake and he's gone. She looked down at the book, tracing the title with her finger. But he never gives up. Ms. Evans recognized something in Maya's voice, a resonance that went beyond simply summarizing a plot. It was a connection, a shared understanding of struggle and resilience. That's a powerful theme. Thank you for sharing, Maya. As she walked back to her desk, Ms. Evans caught Sophia's eye. Sophia gave her a small, grateful nod. Ethan, however, was staring at Maya again, his expression unreadable. The next day, during a discussion about the Amazon rainforest, a student asked, "What's the biggest threat to the rainforest?" Before Ms. Evans could call on anyone, Maya spoke. Deforestation, she said, her voice stronger now, resonating with newfound conviction. Especially for cattle ranching and soy production. It destroys the habitat, displaces indigenous communities, and releases massive amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. A hush fell over the class. It wasn't just the information, it was the passion in her voice, the unwavering certainty. Ms. Evans smiled, a genuine, unrestrained smile that reached her eyes. It wasn't just about maps or helicopters anymore. Maya was finding her voice, and the sound of it was breathtaking. The silent girl no more. The whirring blade still echoed in the back of Maya's mind, a phantom sensation that vibrated through her bones. But now, the sound didn't paralyze her, it energized her. The coordinates she'd blurted out yesterday, the seemingly impossible accuracy, had unlocked something within her. Today, instead of shrinking into the back row, she sat at the table Ms. Evans had assigned for group projects, a half-formed volcano constructed of papier-mâché looming between her and Ethan Becker. Sophia Ramirez, her eyes crinkling at the corners, offered a reassuring smile. "Okay, so I think we need more vinegar," Ethan said, pushing a stray strand of brown hair from his face. The eruption was pathetic. Maya, who had been meticulously painting the volcano's base a fiery orange, chuckled. The sound was still new to her own ears, a little rusty, but undeniably hers. "Maybe more baking soda too?" A stronger reaction. Ethan's gaze sharpened, the perpetual half-smirk replaced with genuine surprise. "You think so? I was worried about it overflowing." Sophia, who had been silently layering strips of newspaper, gave Maya a thumbs up. "More baking soda it is." As they experimented with the mixture, a small geyser of foamy lava erupted, splattering across the table. This time, Maya laughed outright, a bright, unrestrained sound that filled the space. Ethan, caught off guard, laughed with her, the sound surprisingly warm. He wiped a fleck of orange paint from her cheek, his fingers brushing her skin. Maya's breath hitched, but she met his gaze, a flicker of something unreadable passing between them. The following week, Maya stood before the class, the volcano, now dry and hardened, sitting proudly on the table beside her. She presented their findings with a confidence that stunned even her. She spoke clearly, explaining the chemical reaction, the geological forces at play, her voice steady and strong. Ms. Evans watched from the back of the room, a quiet pride swelling in her chest. The shy, silent girl was gone, replaced by a confident young woman, brimming with potential. And that, Maya concluded, gesturing to their slightly lopsided volcano, is how a composite volcano erupts. A smattering of applause rippled through the room. Ethan caught her eye and offered a small, encouraging nod. Sophia gave her another of her supportive smiles. Later that evening, Ms. Evans sat at her desk, grading papers. The memory of Maya's presentation replayed in her mind. The transformation was remarkable, almost unbelievable. She wondered about the helicopter, about the coordinates, about the secret Maya had unknowingly carried within her all these years. Had the incident merely unlocked something, or had it awakened a dormant ability? The question lingered, a fascinating puzzle she knew she wouldn't be able to solve just yet, but she knew one thing for sure: Maya Rodriguez was no longer the silent girl. And the world was about to hear what she had to say.